All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick here with Church of the Eternal Logos. We got a great stream today. A major thank you to Leon for sponsoring today's stream, in which we will be analyzing the philosophy of Stoicism, the famous Hellenistic Roman philosophy of pursuit of virtue over all else. Virtue is the only good, famous Stoic quote. And we'll be introducing the sort of paradigm, the worldview of Stoicism, and then comparing and contrasting that with Orthodoxy, most specifically Eastern Orthodoxy, obviously. So with Christianity, but with Orthodoxy. And so I actually put together an 11-page document, I believe is probably the ultimate review of Stoicism and Orthodoxy side by side. And so we'll be covering that document. I got a really great lecture. We're going to be watching a few. Hey, shout out to the Crucible crew and everybody that's here. God bless the Wilsons. Thank you so much, Andrew, for rating today's stream. Really appreciate you, Andrew. God bless and welcome all the Crucible crew, especially for anybody who's here for the first time. Truly appreciate everybody coming over here and checking out my content. And we're going to be having a little bit of a philosophical stream today. MyTech23 says, Raider of the Jim Bob and the Lost Crucible. Thank you very much, MyTech23. Really appreciate you coming over here. Yeah, it looked like multiple people were streaming today, and I caught a little bit of Jim Bob's. He was reviewing that crazy, the guided one, the sort of Protestant Gnostic Muslim that came on a few days ago. And so I saw a few over on Jim Bob's channel, went over to Andrew. So really appreciative of Andrew of sending everybody over here. Thank you so much. Guys, smash that like for everybody who's here. Really would appreciate that. Thank you so much, MyTech23. And if you guys have any questions or comments today, again, we'll be covering Stoicism. I'm going to be talking about the intricacies of Stoic philosophy. What is it? Why is it becoming more and more popular in the 21st century? I have a few reasons why I think that is. Is it a religion? Is it a theology? What is it? The concept of logos. So when we're talking about Christianity and Stoicism, the concept of logos is going to be one that's really crucial. For some of you who have seen my video series I did, actually, was it 4 or 5 years ago now, on logos and Stoicism, logos and Plato, logos and Aristotle, all this different stuff. A lot of that research comes from this book here, From Logos to Trinity, an evolution of religious beliefs from Pythagoras to Tertullian. This is a book by Marion Hiller. It's kind of an expensive book. I purchased this right when it came out. I just happened to find it when it was first published. I think it's now almost like 120, if not more, on Amazon to get a new copy. So a little bit of an expensive book. But if you're ahead, if you really love philosophy, Marion Hiller does a really fantastic job of going through, the pre-Socratics, Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics, Neoplatonism, all these different things, and looking at the concept of logos. So I'm going to read a few excerpts out of this book. Again, this is a really important book in regards to, or at least for me, in regards to understanding how logos develop from a sort of philosophical, demiurgic, creative force. For Plato, the logos is the realm of the forms, to the Christian understanding of logos actually being the second person of the Trinity. Logos with a capital L, if you're writing it in English, right? So we'll be talking about how their logos, one of the things that Stoicism did that departed from the Greek tradition before them was that they attributed virtue, one is the highest good, it's the only good, living a virtuous life. And the more we become virtuous, the more we rationally align with the logos that undergirds all of the cosmos. So for the Stoics, the logos in Plato is totally separate. It's the realm of the forms. It is not immaterial. The Stoics take it a bit further, and they now put logos, they kind of reject the realm of the forms, Stoics do. So they kind of depart from Platonic philosophy and adopt more of an Aristotelian approach. But for them, the logos is a metaphysical structure. It is the principle of rationality that undergirds the entire universe, of which, being human and having human nature, you have a privy access to rationality and then virtue. By living a virtuous life, that means to live a rational life, and we'll get into details about how the Stoics perceive a rational life to be. But we'll be looking at how this logos, for them, they began to attribute virtue, in the way that we live our lives is a way in which we can align with this transcendent metaphysical force. So I have a whole thing laying out the worldview of Stoicism here. I'll actually show you guys the document I created. I think this is one of the ultimate documents on this topic. And I think for sponsored streams, I'm going to start doing more of these documents. So you can see right here, Stoicism and Orthodox Christianity Review. I have a bit of an intro into the major contributors: Zeno, Chrysippus, Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, the 5 big figures of Stoicism. We're going to get into it. I'm not going to introduce this whole document right now, but we'll be looking at the main Stoics, then the influence of Stoicism on Christianity, and then I have a major differences between Orthodox Christianity and Stoicism, and break down the difference, which are actually significant. So when we're reading some of the stuff on logos, we're going to see how it is sort of hinting at the full revelation of the second person of the Trinity, but it's not quite there yet. It's not quite there yet. And so I have all these points in which actually Stoicism and Orthodoxy depart. Then I have a listing. I've written out their epistemology, their metaphysics, their ethics, the Stoic ontology, Stoic anthropology. Is it theistic or polytheistic in Stoicism? And then a summary: nature of God, the human soul, again, Orthodox Christianity versus Stoicism, salvation in the afterlife, ethics and virtue, the role of emotions, the nature of reality, divine providence and free will, revelation and knowledge of God, and then just a little bit of a characterization of how Stoicism was viewed amongst philosophers and important thinkers from the Middle Ages forward, and then why Stoicism is becoming so popular in the 21st century. So we're going to go over this whole document that I've made. I think I'm going to put it up on my website for members. So if you have a $5 membership, you will be able to download this and get access to it. I think that's what I'm going to start doing for some of these philosophical streams. This was actually really insightful. It forced me to really compare and contrast the worldviews and put definitions to things. So I really enjoyed kind of putting this document together for you guys. I think I couldn't obviously find anything that compares Stoicism with Eastern Orthodoxy, but this document here, I think really provides that overview. And so I also want to talk a little bit. I want to, like I said, read a few excerpts from this book, which is going to be focusing specifically on Stoicism and how it understands the Logos. And then there's a lecture that I would just want to play a few clips of. We'll round out the stream with that. And that's by Michael Segru. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Michael Segru. He was a philosopher. He taught at Harvard. He taught at various places. And then I think it was like in the 90s or the 80s, he had a lecture series in which he talked about a sort of overview of philosophy and Western civilization. And unfortunately, he's recently passed away. But just a couple years ago, he made public all his lectures for the first time. They were like on VHSs that nobody can find now. And so he's actually a really incredibly insightful philosopher and thinker. Unfortunately, he's passed away. Memory eternal to Michael Segru. But we're going to be watching a little bit of him talking about the Meditations. Again, the famous book by Marcus Aurelius, right? Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, was emperor for 19 years. He was a devout Stoic. And this book right here is actually his own meditations written to himself. So this book, this collection of writings over the 19 years he was emperor, were never supposed to be published. The actual point of this book was him writing it to himself to reinforce and reflect on his Stoic ideals and how well he was living up to them. So we're not going to be reading the Meditations. I do have a handful of quotes from the Meditations we can go over. I think that'd be useful. But, one of the beautiful things about Stoicism is that it's both for the emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius, and also a Roman slave, Epictetus. And so Stoicism it's a great equalizer because it's one of the first philosophies to actually collapse class structures, because the only thing that is of importance is virtue and living a rational life and a virtuous life in accordance with the Logos. And so Stoic philosophy actually comes out of the sort of branches of Socratic philosophy, Socrates, the teacher of Plato, right? And so Stoicism or Socratean thought breaks into really 3 general schools of thought. It breaks into Epicureanism. And if you're familiar with Epicureanism, this is the philosophy of hedonism, that pleasure is the ultimate good. And then it breaks into skepticism. One of the things about Socrates is the way that he dialogued with people was he was always asking piercing questions, skeptical questions about the premises of the topic or whether somebody else's beliefs were. And one of the schools of thought that emerges out of Socrates is the skeptic school. And so skepticism, we cannot be certain of anything other than the things we don't know. So that's one of the foundational claims of the skeptical school, is that we can't we can't know for a fact our truth claims, but we can know for a fact the things that we don't know. And so let's begin our philosophy there. But really, the great inheritor of Socratic wisdom and Socratic philosophy is Stoicism. And that's the third school that emerges out of the post-Socratic thought. And so Stoicism is the wise man lives in accordance with nature, with virtue, with reason, all governed by the logos. And the only fear that a Stoic has, it's not about murder, it's not about death, fear of poverty, fear of humiliation, none of this. The only fear for a Stoic is failing to live up to one's moral duty. And so when we look at Kant, and we've discussed Kant in previous streams, especially I think we almost did 4 hours with Father Deacon Dr. Ananias on metaphysics. We did an overview of Western metaphysics, beginning with the Greeks, moving into Descartes and all that different stuff. But when you get to Immanuel Kant and his critique of pure reason, he makes the moral argument for God. And so Kantian ethics is known as sort of deontological ethics. It's focused on duties. And some have highlighted that Kant is really pulling that inspiration from the Stoic tradition of philosophy. And I think that there's real credence there. So this idea that every man in Stoicism, let's be frank, it is open for any person, right? So it's not about ethnic groups. However, it is mostly a male-oriented philosophy. I was looking into Marcus Aurelius and his wife, because his wife, the Empress, I was curious of whether, oh crap, my contact. I was curious if whether or not she was a Stoic. And the more I looked into it, the more it said basically it's very probable that she was very familiar with Stoicism, given the disposition of her husband. However, his wife, I saw multiple articles make a point that it was mostly men. Mostly men are Stoic, or at least Stoicism was mostly appealing to men. And at that time, women really didn't engage in philosophy, generally speaking. So Stoicism, and the reason why we call somebody Stoic, right? We still use this verb now, and it's to describe a man, usually a man, who's very sort of emotionless. And the reason why we call them a Stoic is not that Stoicism was about the absence of emotion per se. You could make that claim in different ways, but really what it was about is that the exterior world can never affect us, right? So the only thing for the Stoic that is of importance are the things that are in your control. And the way that we react to our circumstances, the way that we react to the world is in our control. And therefore, that's the only thing that you should focus on, because that's the only thing ultimately you can be judged for. So for the Stoic, then, it's not so much about being emotionless. It's about whatever happens in the exterior world cannot affect my interior world, because I am the guardian of that. I make that decision. And so Stoicism was a philosophy that was very popular amongst the military, very popular amongst the political apparatus. Obviously, Seneca was a Roman senator, famous Stoic. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of the Roman Empire, a Stoic. And for practical people. So like Epictetus was a slave, and one of his contributions to the philosophy of Stoicism, Epictetus, is that he lays it out in very practical ways. Stoicism begins with Zeno, but Epictetus, the slave, he was the one that really sort of reiterated and reframed Stoic philosophy in sort of practical ways for daily life. So we'll get into more details about all that stuff. But the Stoic is a man liberated from fear, right? Because anything that happens in the world, you are not to have fear over. So even somebody is coming to murder you, you are not to have fear, because for Stoicism, there's four primary virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. And so wisdom, obviously, the pursuit of rationality and understanding sort of rational ways of human life and the human condition. courage, and this is why it was so important for political and military people who adopted Stoicism, is because to be courageous, to fulfill your duty, is to be a good Stoic man, a good Stoic philosopher, right? It's all about never fearing anything in the exterior world. The only thing we should fear is us not living up to our virtue, because that is a sign of weakness. Dying or being murdered or facing whatever it is that's before you, that can never be something that would hinder you, because that's outside your control. In regards to the passions which the Stoics are always trying to navigate away from, that includes distress. So being overly distraught again about the exterior world, they would say, this is a weakness, guy. Get yourself together. What are you talking about? You're upset about the American politics or the state of Western civilization. You can't control any of this stuff. Get yourself together. What are you talking about? How are you living your life? The second one is fear. You're a Stoic is to never have fear. To be fearful is to be irrational. Lust does not generally, when we talk about lust, we're talking about sexual lust. For the Stoic, lust is more than just sex. It can be greed. It can be gluttony. Lust is just the desire for something more, really. And I'm going to show you guys again. A lot of this stuff is grouped in the concept of lust. And then delight. Being overly excited is actually another passion that the Stoic wants to do away from. So we talked about the negative side effects of life and negative circumstances and how people want to control their emotions, but it's also true in positive circumstances. So when people are congratulating you, telling you how great you are, giving you all these compliments, a Stoic is somebody who should never let these things or gifts or pleasures change the interior disposition of oneself. This is also a sign of weakness. So whether you are getting distraught about negative stuff or getting delighted about positive stuff, both of those are weaknesses, because the exterior world is having an influence and control on you. So a virtuous, orderly soul is the highest good. Because if I live my life in a rational, virtuous way, not only does it order my soul and psyche, this is the understanding of Stoicism, but it will aid in influencing and ordering the world around me. Not that it always does, because Stoicism is really not about a community per se. This is one of my differences when we look at Christianity versus Stoicism. Stoicism doesn't really have a role for the community, although there is a collective effect and influence that the individual has by living up to their moral duty. So as we live up to our potential, this will have a positive ripple effect. However, the goal is not to change the world. The Stoics did not have a creation myth or belief that the universe had a beginning point. Like Hinduism, Stoicism has much more of a Hindu cosmology, in the sense that the Kali Yugas, we've talked about Hinduism, Kali Yugas, the cycles of basically creation and destruction of the universe. Now, samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth, is a reflection of the way in which they believe the cosmos acts. And Stoicism generally believes this to be true as well. And from my investigation, this was one of the criticisms that Marcus Aurelius had for Christians, is because he believed that there is nothing after death. The only thing is to live. If I live virtuously, I will be subsumed back into the logos. This is the Stoic worldview. You're not still a person. You're not an eternal soul. The soul is just subsumed back into that which is the world soul, the logos itself. And so Marcus Aurelius thought the Christians were irrational because they were so focused on salvation and judgment after death, even though the virtues and living a moral, virtuous life and aligning with logos, we'll see this is obviously a common denominator. It's just orthodoxy, and Christianity takes it even further. It takes Stoicism as a sort of practical, virtuous philosophy, and it incorporates the good elements and places that in a revealed prophetic theology. There's also multiple aspects of Stoicism that we would reject. For example, Stoicism does not condemn homosexuality. This was one of the things that I found in the research for today's stream, is that it wasn't uncommon for both Seneca, Epictetus, and Zeno to condone homosexuality. They thought that as long as you had a sort of rational sexual behavior. So you weren't raping people, you weren't overly consumed with your sexual desires, that they didn't really have a problem whether you're with a man or a woman. And in fact, I believe it's Epictetus or Zeno who said that, yeah, even I think it's Zeno, even boys and girls should be educated about sex and be open for sexual activity. And he was in favor of doing away with marriage and making wives communal. So Stoicism, as much as it is a sort of practical philosophy of virtue, still has things, hangups from the ancient world that we would absolutely disregard. And so I was just doing a sort of cultural search to see how Stoicism is embraced, and Stoicism is clearly on the rise right now. And I believe the reason why is Stoicism, why is this ancient Hellenistic Roman philosophy on the rise right now? And I kind of pulled three different reasons. And, there's a huge YouTube channel called The Daily Stoic, which is really just all about Stoicism and pushing Stoicism super, super hard. That Stoic philosophy in general is opposite of hedonistic consumerism and feminine emotionalism. So as we live in the 21st century where hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure, you got your truth, girl, you got your truth, go live it out, have as many partners as you want, buy as many things as you want, fulfill your materialistic desires. This is anti-Stoic. And this is really the culture that we're swimming in. And so I think for young people searching for an identity, specifically men, let's just point out, I mean, as I said, Stoicism historically is mostly men, but then the popularization of Stoicism in the contemporary period is mostly young men. And I've said there's an identity crisis. So young men are looking for an identity, and Stoicism provides a sort of rational philosophy rooted in the pursuit of virtue, rooted in the idea of masculine duty. And it's asking you to go against the cultural zeitgeist of the 21st century of feminization, emotionalism, consumerism, hedonism. It's asking you to do the exact opposite of that. And I think that's really appealing to young people who are looking for something of that nature. And of course, it is a masculine philosophy. So again, if you're in the 21st century and you're maybe somebody who doesn't have religious commitments, maybe you're agnostic, you're not sure about the existence of God, and you're also sort of red-pilled, you're sort of on the cultural counterculture right now in Western civilization, you can see why Stoicism would be really appealing. It sort of promotes masculinity. It promotes idea of masculine duty. It's asking you to really move in opposition to everything that our contemporary culture is pushing. So that's one point. A second point that I would point out is that Stoicism is a self-help philosophy. So when I was looking at the Daily Stoic or some of these prominent social media accounts promoting Stoicism, they really water it down, and it's almost like this self-help philosophy. And I've seen how Stoicism is being utilized within psychotherapy, because let's face it, we have a bunch of weak people in the Western world who are sort of paralyzed by the things that are happening in the world, right? They get misgendered, and all of a sudden their whole lives break down. Well, the Stoic would say that is the absolute form of weakness. I have pity on you because you are not in control of your own life. You're not in control of your own soul. You're not in control of your own mind. And so I've seen psychotherapy adopt Stoic principles to try to strengthen both men and women to the idea that you have free will to respond to the world that exists, and that the world is not entering you and forcing you to feel certain ways, that the ways that we feel is a choice. And so Stoic philosophy has been incorporated as a self-help philosophy by psychotherapists and like manosphere types. And so it's, again, reacting to where Stoicism is asking you to not react constantly to the world. Because if you are like a dog on a leash and you're not in control of your own life. And then because Stoicism, although not the historic philosophical Stoicism, as we'll look when we're talking about logos, it is referring to God multiple times. Now, God is not a personal idea. It's a sort of abstract universal force, the pneuma, the spirit, the logos. For Stoics, the pneuma, the spirit, the world spirit, and the logos are tied together, which I'll make a point. We can already kind of see the Trinity slowly being unveiled within Stoic philosophy. But because the contemporary use in the 21st century does not focus on God, I think it's appealing to young people that they can adopt an ancient philosophy, masculine orientation, reacting against the modern zeitgeist. And yet they don't have to belong to a religious community. They don't have religious obligations. They really don't have any obligations other than themselves and their own conscience in regards to how virtuous they're living their lives. So I think that's an appeal. And then the last one I have for why it's popular in the 21st century is that it's highly rational and practical, that is beneficial for an individual in a degenerate world. And that's part of Stoics made this case. I think Seneca explicitly made the case that Stoicism is the ideal philosophy for a man wanting to be virtuous in a degenerate world. Well, I mean, that context certainly existed a couple millennia ago, and that's certainly still the case today. So I think those reasons make Stoicism quite popular in the 21st century. But as I said, it breaks down class structure. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, and then you have Epictetus, the slave. So Stoicism is both for the emperor and the slave. It's an equalizer, focusing on moral duty. It's not about how much money you make. So again, getting your Lambo and your Bugatti to demonstrate your social status, this is anti-Stoic. This is what they would consider that feminized hedonism, consumerism. This is somebody who is not in control of themselves. And so social status does not dictate a good man in Stoicism. How much money, how much success, how much status you have is totally irrelevant on the spectrum of the good versus the bad man on Stoic ideals. And so we look at somebody like Marcus Aurelius, and I'm going to play a clip of Professor Michael Segru talking about this. Imagine a man who's emperor of the largest empire in the world, or, the known world is how they used it. You have as much money as you want. You could have as much sex as you want. You could have as much wine or debauchery as you want. And yet your entire life, as articulated in the meditations, is about consciously never engaging in any of that stuff because of temperance. Temperance is the moderation of things, the four virtues of Stoicism: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. So temperance, having a temperance, never indulging yourself, is a huge portion. And so the meditations, like I said, he wanted this burned actually after he died. And it was a court philosopher who saw what he had been writing over the 19 years to himself and decided, no, we're not burning this. So I'm going to copy this as a manuscript. And that's the reason why we even have the meditations today. And so in it, I mean, you can feel the melancholy and the pity. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, the most powerful man in the world at the time, if you read the meditations, is also the loneliest man in the world. And he's the loneliest man in the world because the people surrounding him in the imperial court are degenerates. They're not led by virtue, and they're not interested in the pursuit of virtue. And so multiple times in the meditations, Marcus Aurelius laments that he has to, despite, again, receiving negative, detrimental, or even condemning actions by other people, he always wants to return harm with benefit. That's the Stoic ideal. So even though he looks down upon the people working for him, he never condemns them. And he even mentions this in the meditations that, how can I condemn them when I look at my own self and my own failings and my own virtue? So very Christian in that sense. Although, again, Marcus Aurelius, I was looking into his persecutions of Christians, and it doesn't seem that he specifically had a huge animosity towards Christianity. He found it irrational based on two reasons. Again, this focus on the afterlife and salvation and judgment. The other one was the refusal to participate in the imperial religion, right? Burning the incense to the emperor. And he thought this was irrational on his Stoic principles because in his mind, there's nothing virtuous about the Christian not choosing to burn the incense because it leads to the persecution of their people, killings, the Colosseum, all this different stuff. So he actually viewed their resistance as irrational. And that was really the only two major points I could find of Marcus Aurelius. Now, during his reign, there were multiple instances of mass persecutions, hundreds, if not thousands of Christians at a time. However, I couldn't find any evidence that Marcus Aurelius himself ordered those persecutions. What I found was they were done by the local community. So local communities would scapegoat the Christians for XYZ happening. Could be in a plague, could have been disease. I saw one account was that disease was running rampant. So the community blames it on the Christians, who are a minority group at that time. They round up as many Christians as possible and kill them publicly. We're talking about hundreds. But Marcus Aurelius himself, I didn't find, and I could be wrong, but you guys can let me know in the chat. I couldn't find anything that he specifically wanted to condemn Christians per se. He did view the refusal to burn incense as a potential threat to the power of the emperor, but he doesn't really make any explicit claims. We don't have any historical claims that he hated the Christians or wanted to kill them or persecute them. And then the last thing I'll say about Stoicism, and then we'll start getting into the meat and potatoes of the stream, is that Stoicism is a cosmopolitan philosophy. Before Stoicism, philosophy was very regional, right? So if you came from Athens, if you came from Sparta, if you came from different places, if you came from Rome, there's sort of philosophical schools of thought that you were emergent from. Whereas with Stoicism, it's cosmopolitan, but cosmos, so the universe, politan, polis, city, it's the universal city. It's cosmopolitan in the sense that the Roman Empire was multicultural, many different religions, many different ethnicities, many different languages being spoken. And so because of the emphasis on personal virtue, Stoicism was one of the few philosophies at that point that could break through all these different groups of people, because it didn't matter your language, didn't necessarily matter your religion, and it didn't matter your social status. So wherever the Stoic is, he lives in harmony with nature, and therefore he lives in harmony with the cosmopolitan ethos of the world. It was perfect for the Roman Empire, and every man and any man had the same opportunity to Stoic virtue. So those are a few points I just want to open with. Again, I got a lot more, as I showed you guys. I got a whole document that I put together that I'm really excited to show you guys. So smash that like for everybody who's here. Thank you all very, very much for your support. Shout out to Montana Moser, throws in $10, says, sorry if this is off topic. Would it be accurate to say that Stoicism would see people as cookie cutter, drones of people, but Orthodoxy would serve things like personality and individual qualities? No, I wouldn't say Stoicism it's not individualism. So if that's what you're getting at, even though it's highly individualistic, because a Stoic does not practice their virtue in a communal, there's not a church, there's not a community body per se. So a Stoic can live a justly Stoic life surrounded by no Stoics, or away from any other Stoic philosopher. And therefore the individual in their choice, their rational choice to pursue morality, is of the highest importance. And so I wouldn't say that it considers people drones per se, although it is the first philosophy that, like I said, is cosmopolitan. It allows the opportunity of the good and ultimate life to anybody, right? So for example, if you were an Epicurean and pleasure was the highest good, well, you needed resources to experience great pleasure, the finest wines, the finest silks, the finest accoutrements that you could get in the ancient world. That means you need resources. That means pleasure and pursuing the good life means also acquiring resources. Therefore, there's almost a class structure built into Epicureanism to a degree. Stoicism, not so much. So Stoicism does break down the playing field, so anybody can be a great Stoic, whether you're a slave or an emperor. But I wouldn't say they necessarily destroy individuality, but I would agree with you about the personality and individual qualities being preserved in Orthodoxy, because as we'll see, the logos for the Stoic is not personified. They do not have a personal understanding of God, and therefore the person does not live forever. The soul is not immortal for the Stoics. So to a degree, I will agree with you to a degree. But certainly Orthodoxy conserves the personality and the individual qualities more so, because we believe that you're created for that specific purpose, where Stoicism, the logos is governing a cyclical universe that never begins and never ends. So we can say it's a more abstract. Stoicism definitely have a more abstract anthropology than Orthodoxy. But thank you so much, Montana Moser. And he throws in another $5, says, here's another $5 just because I like this so much. Tonight is Old Calendar Dormition feast, so blessed feast for what it's worth. Well, thank you so much, Montana Moser. God bless you and blessed feast to you. Over on Streamlabs, we got a couple super chats by AC. Oh my gosh, he just threw in a very generous super chat. Let me pull this up. Wow, thank you so much, AC. AC throws in $100. Thank you so much, brother. He says one of two. The Stoics had a doctrine of lived physics where they had to know proto-science because use I think it was virtues was part of nature. I think is what he's saying. They thought if you didn't have the facts, you wouldn't believe. Modern Stoicism gets subsumed by science and the grounding. When modern attempts to incorporate in it a total worldview, it develops into dialectics without a clear theology. And Vervaeke's model Stoicism is the discipline baseline, but it gets thrown out when Neoplatonism shows up. One does it after stage one. Okay. No, I get your point there, AC. It is a very naturalistic, rational philosophy. And so, and we'll see with Chrysippus, he really lays out the logical doctrines. Let me just show you guys that second super chat. And Chrysippus really lays out the logical foundations of Stoicism. And I could certainly see how Stoicism could lead into a sort of a scientific, spiritual worldview for sure. But, for the average atheist scientist, I don't know if they're going to be pursuing objective morality and objective ethics in the same way. So I would definitely take a Stoic over a Vervaeke of the contemporary period, because at least the Stoic, and we'll see with Marcus Aurelius, we certainly are going to have, as Orthodox Christians, contentions with Stoicism and major disagreements in regards to their world. I would take a Marcus Aurelius or an Epictetus over a Vervaeke or a Peterson any day, because at least with Marcus Aurelius, he's not a hypocrite. We may disagree with some of his worldview. We may disagree, and we can certainly see how maybe in ways Stoicism sets the foundations for other philosophical systems we may disagree with. But as a man trying to embody the values that he believed in, I think Marcus Aurelius is actually an astounding historical figure. But, I'll leave that up to debate. But thank you so much, AC, for the very generous super chat. Really appreciate that, brother. And yeah, I disagree. I agree with you about the naturalistic virtue of Stoicism. So thank you so much for that support. Really appreciate it. So let me do real quick housekeeping, and then let's get straight into the topic, because I got tons of stuff to share with you guys today. So I want to get right into it. Smash that like, guys. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send those in. Also, if you guys would like to support my work, one of the best things you can do is go to my website and become a website member. We got tons of exclusive video content. We do private meetings twice a week. We got one this Wednesday. So tomorrow night, we'll be having a premium members group. This is a private think tank. It's not recorded. If you want to be part of those private conversations, you can do so with that link right there. Also, if anybody would like to sign up for a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here, and we can set up a time to chat. Of course, a major thank you for this stream goes out to Leon for sponsoring today's stream, of which he asked for a comparison of orthodoxy and Stoicism. So that is the goal today. So if you also have a topic and you'd like to sponsor it and for me to dive into it, you can do so with this link right here and sponsor a stream. I'd greatly appreciate that. Also, if you guys are interested in some of the prophecies that I've been talking about recently, I would highly recommend you guys go over to the eschatonvigil.org. The eschatonvigil.org. This is a non-for-profit that I work with, and they are putting together all the prophecies, everything regarding the end times and Orthodox theology in English. It's the only place on the internet in the world like it. If you'd like to support that, go over to the Eschaton Vigil. You can sign up to be part of the mailing list for free. If you want access to the thousands and thousands of prophecies, that is a monthly membership. So check that out. as well. And also, guys, if you're in the market for any Orthodox items, be them icons, incense, prayer ropes, whatever it may be, check out the orthodoxdepot.com website. This is a great American company here in the Midwest, run by Orthodox Christians here in America. And so see if they have anything that you're looking for. Use promo code COTEL. You'll get 10% off. It's a great way to help me out as well as an Orthodox business. So if you're in the market, check that out. Would greatly appreciate it. All right. So with all that being said, now let's really get into everything that I have today. I think to begin, I really want to lay out my document. I think my document is going to be really beneficial. But you know what? Maybe we'll listen to the very beginning of Dr. Segru. Let's do that. Let's listen to the very beginning of Dr. Segru, the first section. Then the second part will play towards the end of the stream. So let me pull that up. Okay. So this guy right here, highly recommend if you guys are philosophy or heads in any way, I highly recommend you guys going to and subscribing to this YouTube channel. Unfortunately, he just passed a couple months ago. His name's Michael Segru. This is him from, I believe, the 80s or the 90s. He had this lecture series, and he covers all types of topics, from the Greek philosophers all the way up to contemporary postmodernism. And unfortunately, he passed away. But this is a section from his lecture on the meditations. And I want to play just the beginning section here. And then I want to go into my document because there's so much resource and information there. I don't want to be too overwhelming. And then we'll look back on some of these other stuff that I want to show you guys. So here is, we're about 7 minutes into his lecture, and this is him introducing Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and why Stoicism is so important.
The Stoic philosopher is the man who has liberated himself from fear. He's not afraid of death. He's not afraid of pain. He's not afraid of other people's dismissal as a fool. The only thing he cares about is that he should meet his moral obligations. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said that greatness is the perception that virtue is enough, which is an elegant and beautiful line. And he might well have stolen that from one of the Stoics, because all of the Stoics basically believe that. Virtue, moral virtue, an organized soul which pursues rationally the ends which are good for all human beings. That's the Stoic conception of virtue. They finally understand their greatness consists in the fact that they perceive that virtue is enough. We do not need wealth. We do not need sexual gratification. We do not need life itself. If moral virtue tells us that we must die in the pursuit of some good end, the protection of our family, the protection of our home, the protection of the innocent, in the doing of right, nothing should be spared, not even our lives. The Stoic wise man is a man who has trained his soul, trained his mind, so that he is not afraid of apparent evils. He is only afraid of real evil. He is afraid of losing control of his soul. He is afraid of being a slave to lust, to desire, to emotion. The Stoic man is the honorable philosopher, the man who stands at his duty and is steadfast and serious-minded. In living according to nature, what the Stoic philosopher does is examine the nature of the human condition and the nature of the world around us. He discerns his position in nature. He discerns the kind of creature that he is, and he lives in such a way as not to disgrace himself, as not to be less than what he truly could be. He won't live the swinish life that we found with Aristophanes. He wants to be, if not a god, certainly not less than human. He won't be an animal either. He will live up to the fullest potentials that human being has to offer. Now, among the Roman Stoics, two are especially noteworthy. One is Epictetus, and one is Marcus Aurelius. And one of the wonderful ironies about the history of philosophy is that Epictetus was a slave and Marcus Aurelius was an emperor. And philosophy is the great equalizer. Both the slave and the emperor can equally well participate in a philosophy that is accessible to all human beings as human beings. There's nothing less less conscious of social status than philosophy. A wise man, a man who is disciplined, in control of his emotions, and follows the way of nature, can be a good man no matter what his position in the social structure is. He is not responsible for the social structure, and it is not his problem. If the gods or nature or whatever is controlling the world makes you a slave, then be a good slave. If God or nature or whatever is controlling the world makes you an emperor, then be a good one. Your job is not to disgrace yourself and live up to the highest potentials of human being. The most interesting of the Stoics is Marcus Aurelius. Lord Acton, the great English philosopher and historian, once said that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's generally speaking true. The difficulty with that generalization is Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was an absolute ruler. He was a ruler of the Roman Empire. He was an emperor. He had absolute power of life and death over everyone in the known world. I don't mean everyone in the world as we know it today, but everyone in the world as the Romans would have known it. They don't know about China or have a very attenuated conception of the Eskimos. For them, the world is the Mediterranean basin, and Rome owns it. And Marcus Aurelius owns Rome, essentially. His word is law. Now, for almost all the Roman emperors, they lived scandalous lives and they disgraced themselves. They were much more concerned with indulging their sensual appetites, satisfying their passions, flying into rages. Marcus Aurelius is the standing exception to that, and the exception to Lord Acton's generalization. In his case, power didn't corrupt. Absolute power did not corrupt absolutely. Instead, absolute power allowed us to see what the man underneath the body is really like. It allowed us to find out what Marcus Aurelius' soul is like. Imagine a man for whom all the restraints of law and custom and political order are taken away. He can have whatever he wants. If a man under those circumstances behaves well, you know something about the soul underneath, because no external constraint is making him do what he is doing. And Marcus Aurelius is the one example of an absolute ruler who behaves himself in such a way as not to disgrace himself. It's an amazing temptation. Imagine what it's like. Stop and put yourself in that place for a second. Marcus Aurelius takes the throne in 161 AD and he dies in 180 AD. 19 years controlling the entire world. He can have all the money in the world. That's not an exaggeration. All the money in the world. If he wants it, he can just collect it all. He can have sex with anyone he wants, whenever he wants, under any circumstances. If he wants to get drunk, he can have wine brought in by the boatload, infinitely, forever. He can go on a drunk now and stay drunk for the next 19 years until he dies. Imagine anything that the bronze, desiring, emotional, irrational parts of your souls want. And now imagine that you can have it. Now, under those circumstances, imagine that you are forced to bear with this human condition for 19 long years. Now ask yourself, and you didn't give a show of hands, but stop and think about it for a minute. How many of you would fail to disgrace yourselves? To tell you the truth, I don't think that I could meet the challenge. If you're honest about it and you stop and think about what kind of a man it takes to bear up under those circumstances, I think you'll have to admit, or at least I'll have to admit, that he's a better man than I am. And that in this respect, over the centuries, Marcus Aurelius serves as a standing reproach to our self-indulgence, a standing reproach to the idea that we are unable to deal with the circumstances of human life. If you can deal with temptation at that level, I cannot imagine what is outside the human potential. And for the Stoics, we must remember that any virtue which is accessible to any human being is in principle accessible to all of us. We all have a rational nature, which allows us to control our feelings, control our behavior, control our connection to other people. Compared to Marcus Aurelius, we have tiny little temptations. We're tempted to steal a little thing. We're tempted to cheat on our income taxes. We're tempted to cheat on our spouses. Marcus Aurelius has that sort of temptation magnified 1,000-fold. And he consistently does good stuff. Stop and think about this for a minute. This is no common man. This is not like the rest of us. And I don't know how he did it. Maybe he did it through philosophy, but, well, it remains to be seen. Marcus is the last.
So we'll conclude again there. We're gonna pick up at the 27-minute mark on this particular video. But right now, I want to now sort of introduce. We kind of have a feel for Stoicism. I want to introduce the worldview to you, the intellectual aspects, and then give you my compare and contrasting of orthodoxy. Because like I said, this document is 11 pages, so I'm not sure how long it'll take to get through this. It shouldn't be too long, that's for sure. But before I do, shout out to AC through in another $10. Thank you so much, AC, for your support, brother. He says, I ask atheists all the time why they are fine with Stoicism and cognitive behavior therapy, but hate it when virtue and meaning come in. Exactly. Yeah, Stoicism is great in regards to getting people to not be affected by the exterior world. But as soon as they have to live a virtuous, moral life that has real meaning, all of a sudden they have problems with it. Great point, AC. And then shout out to Siege D. God bless you, brother. Throws in $5. He said, this ought to be good. Stoic concepts are preached frequently in the red pill. An example, hold frame. So I'd like to hear how biblical Stoicism is. Well, that's what we're going to be getting into, Siege D, and laying out some of the major important differences between these worldviews as well. So, okay, let's begin here. I started by giving you guys an intro to the famous 5 Stoics. Now, there's more Stoics than this. Certainly, these are just the 5 prominent ones, just to give you an introduction. So the man who founded Stoicism, Zeno of Citium, again, 334 to 62 BC. He is the founding of Stoicism. Zeno is credited with founding the Stoic school of philosophy around 300 BC. He established Stoicism as a systematic philosophy that encompassed logic, physics, and ethics and virtue. Zeno emphasized that virtue is the highest good and is sufficient for happiness, right? So this is him butting up against the Epicureans. The Epicureans are saying, hey, pleasure and seeking sensual pleasure, this is the ultimate good. Stoics are saying, no, virtue is sufficient for happiness. Virtue is the ultimate good. He argued that living in accordance with nature and reason is the essence of the virtuous life. Again, that's the logos, but it's a sort of demiurgic logos. For Zeno, virtue was the only thing truly valuable, and all other external goods, wealth, health, etc., are considered indifferent. Concept of logos. Zeno introduced the idea of logos as the rational principle that orders the universe. The concept would become central to Stoic metaphysics, linking the natural order with human rationality and ethical behavior. And so that's one of the important things to understand Stoic philosophy and what's going on is it is linking a sort of universal metaphysic with the undergirding structure of reality. For them, the logos, not God, not the second person of the Trinity, but it is the source of rationality and order in nature. So we in other streams, you talked about Heraclitus, Plato, Aristotle, and now the Stoics, in a way, are combining all these philosophies together to re-articulate the logos. And for the first time in history, they're saying the morality and the virtue that we live in our lives, that's what links you back to logos. So it's not about understanding the ideal forms. It's not understanding the essence of things and particulars in the world. No, it's about the virtue that we live. And this we can see, again, already related to Christianity, because Christ is the logos. The logos is a person. It's not an abstract undergirding force of nature. Christ is the logos. Christ, this force, this logos for the Stoics, we believe takes human form, is revealed through Scripture. And so when we read John 1:1, which I make mention of this throughout this document, they're saying the logos, okay, Stoics, you think the logos is this? We're saying it's this. So Christianity and Orthodoxy is expanding the definition and the concept of logos by adding to it the prophetic tradition of the Hebrews, the Old Testament, the Messiah, God incarnate, with the rational philosophy of the Greeks. So philosophy and distinctions. Zeno's Stoicism was heavily influenced by earlier philosophers, particularly Socrates and the Cynics. However, he moved beyond cynicism by developing a more structured ethical system that emphasized rationality rather than mere asceticism. And Zeno's ethical teachings laid the groundwork for Stoicism, later developments focusing on living a life of virtue through rational self-governance. Then we have Chrysippus of Soli. Chrysippus, he's the one that really articulates the logical philosophical dimension behind Stoicism. And so in regards to systemization of Stoicism, Chrysippus is often considered the second founder of Stoicism due to his role in systematizing and expanding Zeno's teachings. He is credited with writing over 700 works, and 300, I didn't write this in here, but I found one article referencing that Chrysippus wrote 300 works just on logic. So yes, 700 works. Most of those have been lost to history, logic, and epistemology. Chrysippus made significant contributions to Stoic logic, developing a propositional logical system that contrasted with Aristotle's syllogistic logic. He argued that knowledge is attained through cataleptic impressions, clear and distinct perceptions that cannot be false. And then, so they do believe in the knowability of the exterior world, clearly, because they believe the logos orders the nature. So this is not a modern, Enlightenment, post-Enlightenment philosophy where there's still a question about the knowability of the exterior world. This comes after Kant, really breaking down the a priori givens that people are working on. For the Stoics, those are still given. For the Christians, those are still given. For the Christians, for Orthodox, God created the world. We're made in the image of God, and we are able to perceive the world as real knowledge because of the way in which our relationship is to God. We are given that dominion, that what we see and what we sense expressed through nature is real. And the Stoics also believe that. Determinism and free will. Chrysippus advanced that the Stoic doctrine of determinism, positing that everything happens according to a rational, predetermined order. However, he also introduced a nuanced view of free will, arguing that humans can assent or resist their impressions, allowing for a moral responsibility within a deterministic framework. And so this is another really interesting attribute of Stoicism, is that it's actually deterministic, but you still have free will. So obviously determinism is very popular now with the scientism school, right? We have the Big Bang and macroevolution and everything's determined. It's all random. You have no free will. Well, the Stoics sort of adopt aspects of that, but also believe that you do have free will. Chrysippus is known for integrating and defending the core principles of Stoicism against critiques, especially in areas like logic and ethics. His work ensured that Stoicism remained a coherent and robust philosophical system. And then unlike Zeno, who primarily focused on ethical teachings, Chrysippus placed a stronger emphasis on logic and epistemology, which became foundational elements of the Stoic curriculum. Again, that's that propositional logic that he's saying actual sense impressions are actually real and are factual. Then we get to Epictetus, the third main figure. He's the slave. Now, practical ethics. Epictetus, a former slave, is renowned for his focus on the practical application of Stoic philosophy. His teachings, compiled by his student Arrian in the Discourses, emphasize the importance of distinguishing between what is within our control and what is not. Again, this is one of the reasons why Stoicism believes that any sort of fear is irrational, because anything that you should fear is actually inside your control. And so you shouldn't fear it. You should just make the right decision and correct it. Concept of control. Epictetus stressed the dichotomy of control as central to Stoic ethics. He taught that tranquility comes from focusing on your own will and actions while accepting external events as beyond our control. So whatever happens, whether your fate takes you from wealth to poverty, it shouldn't change the interior disposition of the Stoic. Stoic determinism and freedom. Epictetus argued that true freedom comes from internal mastery over desires and aversions, aligning oneself with nature's rational order, the logos. This internal freedom is the path to happiness regardless of external circumstances. And I wanted to relate this back to an Orthodox text. Now, again, this isn't Christian yet, but this idea that morality is actual true freedom. I highly recommend you guys reading this book by Christos Giannaros, The Freedom of Morality. This is a fantastic, it's very theological. It's text about orthodoxy, highlighting what, as an Orthodox Christian, do we believe freedom to be? Is freedom that which most people believe right now, that you can, do anything and everything that you want? No. Freedom for Christos Giannaros is the morality of Christ and the ability to participate in theosis. That is freedom. Freedom is being able to choose the wrong thing, but true freedom is choosing the right thing, because when we choose sin, we become chained to our sins. Same idea is actually present in Stoicism, although it's not articulated in our theistic framework. It's articulated in the sort of abstract philosophy of Stoicism. But that idea, right, that true freedom is moral, and that morally aligning with the logos is freedom. That is literally part of our Orthodox worldview. So I just want to highlight that. Now, Epictetus, as I'll also show you, has some other very strange ideas, like condoning homosexuality and stuff like that. But I digress. Philosophy and distinctions. Epictetus differs from earlier Stoics by emphasizing the accessibility of Stoic practices to all people, regardless of social status. His teachings are highly practical, aimed at providing guidance for everyday life. His focus on the dichotomy of control distinguishes his approach from other Stoics who may have been more theoretical. Epictetus' Stoicism is intensely personal and pragmatic, and I would argue this is the Stoicism that most people are adopting. So as Siege D highlighted that Stoicism is very popular in the Red Pill movement, it's this Epictetus form of Stoicism particularly. This is the personal and the pragmatic. This is, in ways, when we talk about the self-help Stoicism, this is what we're talking about. Then we have Seneca the Younger, all right? Stoics in Roman society. Seneca was a Roman statesman, dramatist, and philosopher who sought to adopt Stoicism to the context of Roman society and governance. His writings, including essays, letters, and tragedies, provide practical advice on living a virtuous life in a corrupt society. Moral psychology. Seneca explored the nature of emotions and how they can be managed through a rational self-examination and philosophical reflection. He emphasized the importance of controlling destructive passions and fostering positive emotions like love and friendship within a Stoic framework. The role of philosophy as therapy. Seneca viewed philosophy as a form of therapy for the soul, offering comfort and guidance in the face of life's challenges. His works often focus on the Stoic approach to dealing with adversity, loss, and anger. And then we'll conclude here with Marcus Aurelius. He was obviously the Roman emperor. We mentioned that. Is best known for his book, The Meditations, which he never wanted published. A series of personal reflections written in Greek, which provide insight into his application of Stoic philosophy to the challenges of leadership and personal ethics. The Meditations are a key text in understanding Stoic philosophy as a lived practice. Leadership and duty. As a Stoic ruler, Marcus Aurelius emphasized the importance of duty, service, and responsibility. I mean, that hammered in this book. He saw his role as emperor as part of the divine order and believed that his personal virtue and rationality should guide his governance. And that's why many people throughout history have said that Marcus Aurelius is the closest resemblance to Plato's philosopher king. So if you guys have read Plato's Republic, the philosopher king is a wise, prudent ruler who's, again, rooted within a sort of deep philosophical understanding. That would be Marcus Aurelius as a Stoic. He is the sort of epitome of the philosopher king. And his writing stressed the importance of accepting one's fate as part of the natural order. So differences, his Stoicism is deeply introspective and reflects on the practical challenges of applying Stoic principles in the context of imperial rule. Unlike other Stoics, his reflections are personal and self-directed rather than aimed at teaching others. His emphasis on duty, leadership, and the impermanence of life distinguishes his Stoic practice from other philosophers who are not in positions of political power. Marcus Aurelius embodies the Stoic ideal of the philosopher king. Now, this is some of the general aspects that are believed by many people, Stoic influences on Christianity. Now, obviously, Christianity is much more than a philosophy. So I don't want it to sound like by looking at a few of these three aspects that I wrote down that I'm saying that Christianity couldn't exist without Stoicism. That's not what I'm saying. As we believe as Orthodox Christians, God, through his providence, used two different lines of thought to reveal his teachings in Scripture. And that is the prophetic tradition of the Hebrews with the philosophical, rational tradition of the Greeks. And we as Orthodox Christians believe the New Testament, especially the Gospel of John, is the uniting of these things. It's showing that through God's providence, yes, he was using the Greek philosophical system to bring clarity and articulation to things that maybe didn't previously exist, to make way for understanding of who Christ is. And so I don't want it to sound like I'm saying Stoicism built Christianity or something like that, but I'm saying Stoicism in these particular three dimensions allowed a further understanding of who the second person of the Trinity was and is. So ethical teachings. Look, virtue is central to life. Both Stoicism and Christianity emphasize the importance of living a virtuous life. Early Christian thinkers, like the church fathers, found Stoic teachings on virtue, self-control, and detachment from worldly goods compelling and compatible with Christian moral teachings. Inner peace and self-control. The Stoic ideal of achieving inner peace through self-control and detachment from external circumstances resonates with the Christian concept of inner peace, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding. This idea influenced Christian aspects, practices where self-control and discipline are central to the Christian spiritual life. Again, I'm referencing there Philippians 4:7. As we've already mentioned, the Logos. For Stoics, the Logos is the source of divine reason and its rationality that unites humanity with God, the demiurge, the undergirding structure of nature, the Logos. So concept of Logos. The Stoic concept of Logos as the rational principle that orders the universe had a significant impact on early Christian theology. The Gospel of John begins, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This concept was central to Christian understandings of Christ as the incarnate Logos, the divine reason manifest in the world. And then providence and divine order, Stoic ideas about the rational order of the cosmos guided by Logos and divine providence. They really do, in the Meditations, Marcus Aurelius mentions Logos and providence multiple times. Found a parallel in Christian teachings about God's sovereignty and the divine plan for all creation. Something that Marcus Aurelius and all the Stoics say over and over is nothing happens for no reason. Because the Logos orders nature and the Logos is the source of rationality, everything that occurs has a rational order and therefore has a purpose and therefore is not an accident. So no Stoic believes in a coincidence. And then moral responsibility, human responsibility, Stoicism emphasis on personal responsibility for one's own actions and attitudes influence Christian ideas about free will and moral accountability. Both systems stress the individuals are responsible for their moral choices, regardless of external circumstances. Now, here comes my differences. And this is where I put this together, but I cannot find it. There is nothing like this that exists online. Everything that I showed you so far, you guys can probably scrounge up and find. This, I do not think you can find. And so major differences between Orthodox Christianity and Stoicism. I have aspects on the left and then Stoicism versus Christianity. So first one, view of God. Does Stoicism believe in a God? Yes, they do. Pantheistic or panentheistic view where Logos or divine reason is immanent in the universe. But that is abstract. It's not personal. And you do not directly commune with the Logos. You are in accord with the Logos when you're acting virtuously and rationally. And then our Orthodox belief is that we believe in a personal, transcendent creator God that is distinct from creation, but created creation. So creation has a beginning point, unlike Stoicism, which is cyclical. It's never ending. Yet an immanent through the Holy Spirit. So we believe in a personal, transcendent God who is distinct from creation, the Logos incarnated as a person, sanctifying and elevating us as part of the created order. And then God is directly immanent right here, right now, at this moment, while I'm streaming through the Holy Spirit. Concept of Logos. Logos is the rational principle that orders the cosmos, an impersonal force. Logos for us is the second person of the Holy Trinity, Jesus Christ, fully divine, fully human. The nature of the soul. Do Stoics believe in the soul? Yes, they do. But the soul is material, a refined sort of spiritual substance. They called it's kind of like the pneuma, and part of the natural world. It returns the Logos upon death. So let's just use Marcus Aurelius. When Marcus Aurelius dies, and let's just say for the video that he lived a high Stoic standard of life, his soul, his belief is not that Marcus Aurelius continues in the Logos. It's that his soul as a material, a sort of ether-like spiritual pneuma material, is just subsumed back into the whole Logos. You see what I'm saying? So like that earlier question by Montana Moser, Stoicism does not believe in the immortality of the soul. They do believe the soul isn't destroyed. It just resumes itself back inside the ultimate rational principle, the Logos. Whereas we believe the soul is immaterial and immortal. created by God and destined for eternal life with God, or separation of God, depending on our actions and how we choose to live our life today. And so, and I don't know if I have it in this document or not, but one of the interesting things that I also want to highlight is that Stoicism believed that the sort of undergirding, the prima materia of creation is fire. So they believe that fire is neither created nor destroyed to the same degree. I mean, but this idea of fire and heat that Stoicism uses, obviously they're picking up from Heraclitus in regards to some of the pre-Socratic debates on ontology. You know, Thales is ontology, is everything built on water, and Anaximenes, everything's built on air. For Heraclitus, it was fire. Heraclitus was the first one to really write and describe the concept of logos philosophically. And then the Stoics also build up on this. And I want to connect this with Orthodoxy because we believe in the river of fire. God's love is fire. When Moses is in front of God at the burning bush, and the bush is being burned but unconsumed, this is the holy fire that comes down at Pascha in the temple, the Holy Sepulchre. It's the fire of Hades. It's the love of God that while we're resisting, we're choosing sin over God, God's love burns us. When we choose God, that fire purifies us. That's repentance, right? So interesting enough, the Stoics use the metaphor of fire a lot. Okay, afterlife. Do Stoics believe in an afterlife? No belief in a personal immortality. The soul is absorbed back into the cosmos, back into the logos. We believe in a strong belief in personal immortality, resurrection, and eternal life in communion with God, the Holy Trinity. Moral responsibility. They base it on rational self-control and living in accordance with nature and reason, the logos. And we can adopt that, but we go further, rooted in free will, divine grace, and following the teachings of Christ and the church. We believe this logos that the Stoics are trying to follow through rationality and virtue incarnated as a man and told us and taught us the way. So we agree with the general basic notion of Stoicism, but we take it further. The logos has been revealed. The logos has become man. Source of virtue. Virtue is cultivated through reason, self-discipline, and aligning with the natural order. For us, virtue is a gift of God's grace, cultivated through the sacraments, prayer, and following Christ's example. Again, so a virtuous life is still aligning with the logos, though. Salvation. They have no... They have no, it's not applicable. So there is no salvation in Stoicism because they don't believe in an afterlife. Stoicism focuses on achieving tranquility and wisdom in this life. And if you pursue rationality and virtue in this life, they believe that provides you the ultimate happiness. So you may ask, why are the Stoics going through all this pain, all this suffering? The reason for it is because they believe that's the ultimate source of happiness. So if the goal is to be happy, you want to live rationally and virtuously. Ours, in regards to salvation, is a central concept. So that's a major paradigmatic difference. Salvation is achieved through faith in Jesus Christ, participation in the sacraments, and living a life of virtue. A view of suffering. Suffering is natural and should be endured with equanimity as it is beyond our control. Now, for us Christians, suffering has redemptive value and can be united with Christ's suffering for spiritual growth and salvation. This is why when we're talking about transhumanism and David Pearce's utilitarian hedonism, he believes that he wants to use technology to reprogram humanity and carnivorous animals to stop consuming other animals so that it will eliminate suffering. He wants to eliminate you even feeling suffering as a person by electrodes in the brain. As an Orthodox Christian, we'd say this is horrendous. This is horrendous because it's through personal suffering of living a virtuous Christian life that we get better and better and better. It's like going to the gym and working out. If there wasn't suffering, there would be no resistance for the muscle of our spiritual life to grow back bigger and stronger. It's like spiritual hypertrophy. Without suffering, there is no spiritual hypertrophy. Role of emotions. So emotions are pathe for the Stoics are viewed as disturbances to be controlled or eradicated through rationality. This is what it means to be a Stoic man who's emotionless. Whereas we as Orthodox Christians, emotions are a part of the human experience. They can be sanctified and redirected towards the love of God and neighbor. So emotions, yes, they must be in control. Yes, we agree with Stoics that you cannot be overly emotional, but emotions are actually something good. And when we read scripture, Jesus, God, the Logos being human, felt emotion. Community and church. This is also another big one. For Stoicism, it's the focus on the individual virtue and self-mastery. It has less emphasis on communal worship or a religious institution. It believes it aids the collective, Stoicism does, by personal virtue. So by you living personally, you positively influence the world. For us, there's a strong emphasis on the communal aspect of faith, the body of Christ. We are saved collectively, right? There is no such thing as a Christian by themselves separated from the body of Christ. And participation in liturgical worship. So for us as Christians, community, communion, communication all necessitate a collectivity. This is essential for us to grow as spiritual entities. Prayer and worship. Stoicism, no prescribed form of worship, focus on meditation and rational reflection. Not saying that those things are bad, but for us in the Christian world, it's central to the Christian life, including liturgical worship, prayer, sacraments, particularly the Eucharist. The incarnation. There is no equivalent concept in Stoicism, does not have a doctrine of a God becoming incarnate. The closest thing you have is the abstract logos, the demiurgic logos, being present within nature. It is in nature. This is what makes aspects of Stoicism panentheistic. So you could say, in a way, the Logos is embodied in Stoicism, in nature, in the universe, in the cosmos, but certainly not incarnated as a person like we believe in our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And then eschatology. Stoicism lacks a developed eschatology. The universe operates in cycles of creation and destruction. Again, it's eternal. The universe is eternal. In Orthodox Christianity, it teaches that the second coming of Christ, the resurrection of the dead, and the final judgment. And I believe, and we've talked about this before in other streams, without an Orthodox fronema, an understanding of world events going on right now, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Iran, all the turmoil going on, it only fully, at least my opinion, this is my opinion, makes sense once you look at the world from an Orthodox perspective, because you can see how this is all a spiritual battle. Whether you're in, the satanic pedophile elite, Zionism, all this stuff is actually related to a spiritual principle, and it's about bringing the Antichrist, a Antichrist figure ruling a one world government. And no matter what group you're looking at, communist, it's all bringing about the same thing. Okay, here I laid out in detail the paradigm of Stoicism, the epistemology. And again, like I said, guys, smash that like. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to send those in. I'll be checking all that stuff out as we go through the stream here. Looks like we did get a super chat over on the Streamlabs. Let me pull that up real quick. Really appreciate it. Looks like it comes from Craig P. Thank you so much. Craig P throws in a generous $50 super chat. Says, I appreciate the work put into these streams. Thank you so much, Craig P. Yeah. I put, again, I got this document here put together. So I hope it's of interest. And like I said before, this will be made available for any website member on my website. You guys can download it. So Stoic epistemology is centered on the belief that knowledge is attainable through reason and that the mind can grasp truth by accurately perceiving the world. As I said, they're realist in that way. The Stoics divided cognition into three stages. Impressions. These are the raw data of experience, which we perceive through our senses. Assent. This is the judgment or approval we give to impressions, where we determine whether they accurately represent reality. And then knowledge. True knowledge arises when we assent to impressions that accurately reflect the rational order of the universe in accordance with the Logos. Now, the Stoics emphasize the importance of cataleptic impressions. Remember, getting back to Zeno, that was at the beginning of this document, which are clear and distinct perceptions that correspond to reality and cannot be mistaken. They believe that by training the mind to focus on these cataleptic impressions and by avoiding false judgments, one could achieve wisdom and certainty in knowledge. Metaphysics. Stoic metaphysics is deeply rooted in the concept of logos, the rational principle that permeates and orders the universe. The Stoics were materialists. Like I said, even the soul has material. Believing that everything that exists is composed of matter, including the soul and the divine. However, they also held that this matter is infused with pneuma, breath, spirit, heat, fire, logos. These concepts are used sort of interchangeably within Stoic philosophy, which gives life and rationality to the cosmos, which again, you can almost see the metaphor there again of God breathing the Holy Spirit right into Adam, that the breath of God, the Holy Spirit, gives life and animates it. We can see this in our creation narrative in Scripture, which predates Stoicism. And again, Stoicism, in a way, is sort of articulating that same concept. Cosmic determinism. So looking at their metaphysics, the universe operates according to a strict rational order where everything that happens is part of a preordained plan by Logos. This determinism does not negate human freedom. As I said, it's an interesting worldview, but instead frames it within the context of accepting or aligning with the rational structure of the universe, right? So everything's happening for a reason. It's determined, it's predetermined by the Logos. The only choice we have to make as a Stoic is whether we align with the virtuous rational choice or we don't. And then unity of all things. Stoicism teaches that all things are interconnected within the cosmos, which is a single living organism. Everything has a purpose and place within this rational order, and nothing exists in its isolation. Okay, Stoic ethics. We've already hit on this quite a bit, but ethics is perhaps the most developed and practical branch of Stoicism. The Stoic ethics is based upon the idea that living in accordance with nature and reason is the path of virtue and happiness. The key ethical principles include virtue is the only good. I've already said that. The Stoics taught that virtue is the sole good and that it is sufficient for a happy life. Other things such as wealth, health, and reputation are indifferent and do not contribute to your actual happiness. The four cardinal virtues, Stoics revolves around the four cardinal virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. I've already told you guys about those. These virtues are seen as expressions of a life lived in harmony with Logos. And then apathy, the Stoics advocated for a state of apathy, not in the modern sense of indifference, but as a freedom from destructive emotions. By mastering one's emotions and desires, one can achieve tranquility and resilience in the face of life's challenges. And so, as we'll see, the very last line that Michael Segru has in that lecture on Stoicism, I love it. He says, and this really does sum up sort of Stoic philosophy. And like, if you're going to do it in one point, I mean, virtue is the only good is obviously a good one, but another good one is all men die, but not all men die whining. And that's what Stoicism is, that you do not whine about anything that happens in the world, because any whining, any excuses, that is a form of weakness. Stoic ontology. Stoic ontology is monistic, asserting that only one type of substance exists. Again, ultimately, it's fire. It's this Logos ether pneuma, which is material. Everything in the universe, including the gods, the soul, and the mind, is composed of this material substance, though in varying degrees of refinement. The Stoics categorize reality into the corporeal, which exists in the material world, which includes all physical bodies and entities, and the incorporeal, abstract entities like void, time, lecta, the meanings of statements, which exist but do not have a physical form. Anthropology, Stoic anthropology. And Stoicism anthropology focuses on the nature and purpose of human beings within the cosmos. Humans are seen as rational animals who possess a unique capacity for reason, which connects them with the divine Logos. So rationality is the essence of humanity. This is huge. Human beings are distinguished by their capacity for reason, which allows them to understand and align with the natural order. This rationality is what makes humans capable of virtue. It's all okay. The soul in Stoicism is material substance, but it also the seat of reason and consciousness. So we can see the sort of early increments of nous, that it's the soul that gives rise to rational faculty. Now, this isn't unique to Stoicism nor Christianity. You have hylomorphism coming out of Aristotle, but again, just another point there, subtle, not exact, but similar to our own Orthodox worldview. And then it is what connects the human being to the Logos and the divine order of the universe. Cosmopolitanism. I said this before. The Stoics believe that all human beings are part of a single community united by their shared rational nature. This idea of cosmopolitanism emphasized the brotherhood of all people and the importance of justice and virtue on a global scale. Now, theism and polytheism, this was my last point here. So Stoicism is a pantheistic or panentheistic worldview. Stoicism is often described as pantheistic because it identifies the divine with the rational order of the universe logos. The Stoic God is not a personal deity, but the rational principle that governs the cosmos. The divine principle is immanent in all things, meaning that the universe itself is a manifestation of God or logos. Polytheism and the Stoic gods, while Stoicism acknowledges the existence of gods, these gods are seen as manifestations or expressions of the one divine logos. The traditional gods of the Greek pantheon, like Zeus, are interpreted allegorically, representing different aspects of the divine order rather than being independent beings with a personal agency. The Stoics were comfortable using the language of polytheism, but their belief system is more accurately described as a form of rational monism or pantheism. And then role of the divine. The divine in Stoicism serves as the source of the natural law, the order that humans must understand and live by. The gods are considered wise and benevolent, embodying the perfect rationality that humans should strive to emulate. The role of the divine is more about maintaining the rational structure of the universe. Rational structure of the universe than about personal intervention in human affairs. So let me take that back. I meant pantheism. They are not panentheistic because God is not totally transcendent. So again, direct oppositions between Orthodoxy and Stoicism, the nature of God. We've already mentioned that one. Orthodox Christianity teaches that God is a personal transcendent being who is both immanent and wholly other than his creations. This is what makes our worldview panentheistic, not pantheistic. God is understood as a Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. 3 persons, 1 essence. This God is not a rational principle, but a personal being who interacts with his creation, reveals himself to humanity, and desires a personal relationship with human beings. Again, theirs is an impersonal pantheistic logos, demiurgic logos. The human soul, Orthodox Christianity, the soul is considered immortal and spiritual, created by God and destined for eternal life. The soul is distinct from the body, though deeply connected to it, and is meant to live in communion with God. After death, the soul faces judgment and either enjoys eternal life with God or experiences separation from him. Again, soul is material, and there is no afterlife in Stoicism. Salvation and the afterlife. Salvation is central. We've already talked about this. Theosis, where humans are transformed by God's grace to participate in the divine life. The afterlife involves eternal communion with God or separation from him based on one's relationship with God during their earthly life. There is no concept of this in the Christian sense. Ethics and virtue. Orthodox Christianity, ethics is based on the teachings of Jesus Christ with love, agape, as the highest virtue. Christian virtue is grounded in a relationship with God and is seen as a response to God's love and grace. Virtue is not self-generated, but is cultivated through God's grace, the sacraments, and participation in the life of the church. Ethical behavior is oriented toward fulfilling God's will and achieving salvation. Stoicism, on the other hand, Stoic ethics is centered on living in accordance with nature and reason, with virtue being the highest good. The Stoics teach that the virtue is self-sufficient for happiness and that it can be attained through rational self-control and detachment from external emotions. Emotions are seen as disturbances. We already talked about that. The role of emotion, we already talked about that. Nature of reality. Reality is created by God, who is distinct from his creation. The material world is good, created by God, but is fallen and in need of redemption. The ultimate reality is God himself, who transcends the created order. The Orthodox Christianity maintains a distinction between the creator and the creation. Stoicism holds to a monistic view of reality where everything is composed of material substance. Divine providence and free will. God's providence is understood as his loving care and guidance for the world, allowing human free will to operate within his sovereign will. Humans are free to choose good or evil, and God respects this freedom, working within it to bring about his purposes. Stoicism teaches a form of determinism where everything happens according to the rational order of the logos, while humans have the capacity to assent or dissent to the impressions and actions. Everything ultimately unfolds according to divine reason. human freedom in Stoicism is understood as accepting one's fate and aligning oneself with the natural order. Revelation and divine knowledge. God is known through divine revelation, particularly through Jesus Christ, who is the ultimate revelation of God to humanity. The Bible, church tradition, and the teachings of the church are seen as the primary means through which God reveals himself. Knowledge of God is also experiential, gained through prayer, sacraments, and the life of the church. For Stoicism, Stoicism does not posit divine revelation in the same way. Knowledge of the divine logos is gained through reason and the study of nature, naturalistic philosophy. The Stoics believe that by understanding the rational order of the universe, one could come to know the divine. There is no concept of a personal God revealing himself to humanity. Instead, the divine is understood through rational inquiry and philosophical contemplation. And then Stoicism in the Middle Ages. This was me just describing how Stoicism has been viewed intellectually. So guys, smash that like. I just want to remind everybody, if you're enjoying this content, smash that like. And if you are appreciative of the effort put in for today's stream, feel free to send in a super chat or ask a question. Or if you're feeling generous, gift some COTEL Crew memberships in the chat. I know the chat always loves that. So Stoicism from the Middle Ages onwards. During the Middle Ages, Stoicism was largely subsumed under Christian theology, particularly through the works of figures like Augustine and Aquinas. So I'm focusing on the West here. Stoic ideas about natural law, virtue, and reason were integrated into Christian thought, but the more materialistic, deterministic aspects of Stoicism were either reinterpreted or rejected in favor of Christian doctrines about the soul, divine providence, and free will. The Renaissance saw a revival of interest in classical philosophy, including Stoicism. Humanists like Erasmus and Montaigne revisited Stoic ideas, particularly those related to ethics, personal virtue, and the rational control of the passions. During the Enlightenment period brought renewed interest in Stoic ideas, particularly those concerning natural law, rationality, and ethics. Remember, deontological ethics related to Kant is very similar to Stoicism. He's pulling that from Stoicism. Thinkers like Kant, who emphasized the role of reason in moral philosophy, were influenced by Stoic thought, even as they developed their own distinct philosophical systems. And then in the 19th century, Stoicism was often viewed through the lens of moral philosophy. Although figures like Nietzsche criticized aspects of Stoicism, the philosophy continued to be respected for its emphasis on personal virtue, resilience, and ethical self-governance. And then Stoicism in the 21st century, it's definitely had a resurgence of the last 20 years in popularity, both in academic circles and in popular culture. This resurgence suggests that Stoicism is far from a dying philosophy. Here's how Stoicism is manifesting today. Modern Stoicism movement. Again, YouTube channels like the Daily Stoic. There's all these manospheres channels on Instagram, Red Pill channels that are constantly pushing Stoic ideals. There has been a revival of interest in Stoicism, often referred to as modern Stoicism, which seeks to apply Stoic principles to contemporary life. This movement includes online communities, conferences like Stoicon, and a growing body of literature aimed at making Stoic practices accessible to modern readers. As I said earlier, self-help and personal development. Stoicism has become influential in the self-help industry, with many books and articles promoting Stoic principles as tools for personal resilience, emotional regulation, and ethical living. Works like Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way and the Daily Stoic have brought Stoic ideas to a broad audience. Psychology and therapy, as mentioned earlier, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, draws on Stoic principles, particularly the idea that their thoughts shape our emotions and behaviors. Stoicism's emphasis on rational control over irrational beliefs aligns closely with the goals of CBT and other therapeutic practices. Leadership and business. Stoicism has found a new audience among leaders and entrepreneurs who value its emphasis on self-discipline, resilience, and ethical decision-making. The Stoic idea of focusing on what is within one's control and accepting what is not has been particularly appealing in high-pressure environments. And then in philosophy and academia, in academic philosophy, there has been a renewed scholarly interest in Stoic texts and ideas. Scholars are re-examining the relevance of Stoicism in areas such as ethics, environmental philosophy, and political theory. So, guys, that concludes my article I put together, my document here. It's 11 pages. Again, I'm going to make that available to people over at the website. If anybody wants that as a resource, you'll be able to download it and have that if you like. Okay, So now what I want to do is there are a few things that I would like to read. But before I read them, I want to play the end of this lecture here. 2744 is what I have written down. So we're going to watch the rest of this lecture from 2744 forward. We're going to watch this, and then I want to read a few things of this very good book. So you guys may not have, if you just joined, you may have missed it earlier in the stream. This book, From Logos to Trendy, not a cheap book. It's like 120 plus on Amazon, but it's a really, really solid book at looking at the development of the concept of logos from pre-Socratic philosophy. Like, again, if you look right here at the chapters, logos in Greek culture, logos in Judaism, Jewish messianic traditions and logos, development of Hellenistic Christian doctrine, Justin Martyr and the logos, Tertullian and the Trinity, Justin Martyr and the metaphysical triad, all this different stuff. It even has Thomas Aquinas as the last one. So it's not orthodox, but it's a great philosophical, historical source. I'm so glad I got that when that book first came out, because I didn't pay 120 bucks for it. I told you that. I think I paid like 40. So if you want, I'm going to read a few things from this book, and if you like it, go grab you a copy, but it's not cheap. Maybe you can find a copy online as a PDF or something. John Kell throws in $5, says, just support. Well, thank you so much, John. I really appreciate that support. Thank you very much, brother. Glad you're enjoying the stream. Again, put a lot of effort into the prep, just because I thought this was a great topic and definitely worthy of the effort. So thank you again, Leon, for sponsoring today's stream. A major appreciation. Everybody in the chat, give Leon a thank you for sponsoring today's stream. Okay, now we're going to watch the rest of this lecture here. And I may speed it up just to get through it quicker, but it kind of throws off his timing. Michael Segru is a really good lecturer, but I may speed it up, and then we're going to read a few things and conclude. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send those in. We can address those right at the end. So check this out.
And now for the first time, we can perhaps see why the Roman Stoics have a reputation, to some extent deserved, of being kind of harsh, cold, unfeeling men. Because there's nothing to worry about. And it's hard for them to sympathize with the fact that other people are worried about things that they regard as trivial or not worth worrying about at all. Many of us worry about sickness. Well, Marcus Aurelius will point out that all people get sick. And once you get sick, since you're a rational human being, you want to go to the doctor, do what he prescribes, and fix your body. There's no point in complaining any place along the line, because you know what you're supposed to do. Go do it. Stop asking for somebody else to help you. If you don't help yourself, how can you expect anybody else to help you? Which is a fair criticism. It would be much less persuasive and much less impressive if this were a sort of hypocritical philosophy where Marcus Aurelius indulged himself and told everyone else to be stoical. What really makes this spring to life, what makes this persuasive and moving and important, is that he lives the life. So he doesn't complain when he gets sick. He doesn't complain when he meets military reverses. He doesn't complain about anything. Who would we complain to? The buck does stop with Marcus Aurelius. If you think of the chain of command of the Roman Empire, he doesn't get to complain to anyone else. Everyone complains to him, and he's constantly listening to complaints and difficulties and problems. And he's watching people become unglued, and they're watching them get all upset, and watching them be greedy and avaricious and swinish and lustful and all the things he's not. So he is rather harsh in his criticism, and I think that that's a fair observation about him. But he's not hypocritical, and he's not unfair. And that's one of the cosmopolitan, universal elements in this political philosophy and in this moral philosophy. Because the moral and political philosophy for Marcus Aurelius are going to be connected. In the same way that in Plato's Republic, politics was ethics writ large, and what was good for the individual soul, the gold, silver, and bronze, that ordering of the soul between reason, spirit, and desire. What's good for the soul is the same thing that's good for the city. To have rational people running the government, like Marcus Aurelius, doing their best to follow the philosophical life. You'll want bravery and fortitude and courage among your soldiers, the silver virtues. And among the rest of the people, you expect the bronze virtues. They want to eat and drink and make merry. It would be nice if we could make philosophers of all of them, but if we can't, well, the best thing we can do is to take care of them and prevent misfortunes from befalling them. In some respects, to try and save them from themselves. Now, Marcus Aurelius is the only example of this in Roman culture. There's not a great deal of things that we can compare him to. If we had to say that there was someone to compare him to, it would be Epictetus, the slave. And Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius could meet at a level of equality, even though the social distinctions between them are enormous and grave. The reason why they would meet at a level of equality, because they could share mutual respect, because they both understand that to have an orderly soul is the key thing in human life. And that's what makes life worth living. And whether you happen to be a slave or an emperor doesn't make any difference. Whether you happen to be sick or healthy doesn't make any difference. Whether you happen to be just born and have 100 years ahead of you, or whether you're on your deathbed doesn't make any difference. Marcus says, with regard to death, because many people are afraid of death, and he has no understanding. He doesn't really understand what everybody else's problem is. He says, look, everyone dies, so you're going to die. So what's the point of complaining about it? I can understand trying to avoid it. I mean, health is a good thing, but when you're going to die, you're going to die. Don't give in to fear. Don't give in to irrational musings. Don't let your imagination run wild. Control your feelings, control your emotions, control that part of you which is you. The meat, your body, not so important. The other stuff around you in the world, a matter of indifference to you. As long as you follow the way of nature, as long as you act in a rational fashion, as long as you live up to the best potentials in the human soul, then you are a good man and you need worry about nothing else. Some people worry about the gods, that the gods will cause you misfortunes, that the gods have a Hades or a hell or an afterlife where people will be tortured and have bad things done to them. Marcus adopts exactly the same position that Socrates did. He says, look, Marcus says, I'm not certain if there are gods. In the book itself, he says, I'm not aware of any rational proof that there exist gods, and I'm not aware of any rational proof that there are no gods. In other words, he's agnostic in that respect. But he takes a position rather like that of Blaise Pascal, and he says, let's think about what the implications are if God exists, and let's think about what the implications are if he doesn't exist, and let's see if we can find one way of acting that'll satisfy both contingencies. Logical guy. And he says, well, if the gods don't exist and the world is just atoms and the void, if you think back to Professor Staloff's lecture about early primitive physical theories, well, we have atoms and the void, homogeneous stuff called matter, and then the space that it moves around in. Well, if there are no gods and there is no moral order to the world and we're just atoms in the void, well, then what difference does it make what happens to you or anybody else? So you come into being, you go out of being. So what? You get healthy, you get sick. So what? There's nothing to get excited about because, well, it's just atoms in the void. Don't be afraid of it. It is what it is. There's nothing to be afraid of. You could say that Roman Stoicism is a way of telling people there's nothing to be afraid of. Nothing can happen to you in nature that is not a part of nature. And nature contains nothing fearful for the rational soul. Now let's take the other half of the Pascalian alternative. Let's consider the proposition that there are gods or a god. Doesn't matter whether it's monotheistic or polytheistic. If there are gods, then they must be rather like the gods of Socrates. They are all good, they are all wise, they are all completely moral and completely virtuous and completely knowing and completely excellent. Would creatures like this do anything bad to you? Well, maybe they would. Maybe if you've been doing bad stuff, maybe there is something actually in store for you later on. There may well be a Hades. Gods like that may want to create moral order in the world and dish out to the bad people of the world just what they have coming to them. But suppose, hypothetically, you lived according to reason and according to nature and according to the universal law of the Logos. Would the gods hurt a man like that, or would a man like that be a friend of the gods? And if a man like that would be dealt with fairly by the gods, justly by the gods, and well by the gods will do you no harm. So there are two possibilities. Either.
And I want to just point out why he's talking about this. We can see how, as Christians, we have a sort of adoptionism that we believe we are sons and daughters of God, right? By living in accordance with Christ, which is the Logos. And it's interesting. He's making the point that Marcus Aurelius highlights in, again, the Meditations, that if you're living rationally and virtuously and aligned with Logos, would you not be a friend of the gods? Would you not be amongst their company to some degree? And even though, again, it's an abstract, universal, impersonal Logos / God, we can see how Orthodoxy clarifies and builds further upon these general premises.
Either the world is atoms in the void. The world is just stuff, in which case there's nothing to be afraid of because you're just part of that stuff and you might as well go along with the flow. Relax. Enjoy the ride. Nothing to be scared of. Nothing to get excited about. On the other hand, and this I suspect deep down in Marcus is what he really believes. I mean, when you just read between the lines and find out what the man himself is like, he does basically believe in the gods, even though he doesn't know. If he had to place a wager either way, same way as Pascal, but perhaps not for the same reasons, he would say, yes, I believe in the gods. And if the gods exist, then they create moral order, and they are perfectly moral themselves, and they are perfectly just and good and righteous themselves, and they will do you no harm. So if there is an afterlife and you behave well, the gods will do you no harm because you deserve no harm done to you. If there is an afterlife and you behave badly, you have no one to blame but yourself. In every case, the only thing that a man is in control of is the individual ego, himself, the cogito, what Descartes will later on call the cogito, the self. If you are in control of that, if you have an orderly soul, then you have a divine soul, a good soul, and your life is worth living. The gods will not penalize you for that. So what's there to worry about? Don't worry, be happy. Either the world is atoms in the void, nothing to worry about. If the gods are there, well, then the gods certainly aren't going to hurt you. Either way, don't worry, be happy. Do what you know you ought to do. Meet your moral obligations. In some respect, and I think that this is worth taking notes on if you happen to be here at the Kant lecture next week or 2 weeks from now, is that the Stoic conception of virtue is an anticipation of what I will call the Kantian.
I love this. Blue Siddle says, if only there was someone to teach us these moral rules. Exactly. That's why Orthodoxy is superior to Stoicism, because even on Stoic grounds, you're going to come towards the full understanding of the moral rules and virtues through the observation of nature. Again, as an Orthodox Christian, we believe, well, nature's fallen, death, all these different things. The Stoic sort of accepts these dichotomies as part of the fate of the world, where the Christian believes that there is a perfected eternal realm. And yeah, so that second person of the Trinity emerges into space and time to lay out what these moral rules are that the Stoics trying to base their life off of. Great point, Blue Skittle. God bless you, brother.
Kantian conception of virtue, those of you who are familiar with the works of Immanuel Kant, can recognize the single-minded and ruthless acquirement of virtue as being the Kantian conception of moral action or good moral behavior, and the Stoic conception as well. Both Kant and Marcus Aurelius have achieved the greatness that comes from being aware that virtue is sufficient in itself. The single-minded pursuit of rationality, of justice, of temperance, of fortitude is what this book is all about. And in some respects, I feel a little bit like a voyeur in opening up a manuscript that Marcus never meant to publish. And doubtless he would be nothing except embarrassed if he knew that people were reading this book, because he wouldn't want to show that crack in the Stoic face, right? He doesn't want to give people the idea that he ever worries or ever gets upset at all. In other words, doubtless, if he's in heaven, he regrets every line he ever wrote. Not because he doesn't think it might benefit us, but because it shows the sort of weakness not entirely consistent with Stoic virtue. Perhaps there are other Stoics who suffered more pain, who had greater difficulties, and never wrote a line. In Marcus Aurelius' view, those men would be greater than he. And whether there exist such people or not, Marcus Aurelius is a sort of standing reproach to our weakness, to our self-indulgence, to our willingness to give in to what we want, to our inclination to make excuses about things that were entirely up to us, and to try and act as if we are not responsible for our behavior. One might want to say that Marcus Aurelius is an important step in the construction of the Western conception of the self or the ego. You are the part of you, not the meat, but the will, the soul, the internal stuff. That's what you're responsible for. That's what the gods will judge you on the basis of. Apart from that, don't worry about it. All other things are matters of indifference to you. Connect yourself to nature, do what's right, and let the devil take the hindmost. It's not your problem. Stoicism is an appropriate philosophy, I would say, for serious, ruthless, introspective people that want real answers and are willing to take no nonsense. In that respect, it's a kind of moral philosophy I would be inclined to teach at, say, West Point. If I were teaching people that are going to be under terrible danger and terrible, fearful conditions, I would teach them to do what they know they ought to do, and to discipline and organize their emotions in such a way as they behave themselves in a way that is not disgraceful. To avoid that is the epitome of Stoic virtue. And it may not have all the attractive elements of Socratic philosophy. It lacks the poetic element of Platonism. It lacks the comprehensive intellectual drive of Socrates. but it still contains elements of elements of Socratic nobility that neither skepticism nor Epicureanism offer us. And in that respect, I think it's the true heir of Socratic philosophy. The key idea behind Marcus Aurelius, something like this, that it's just the human condition for us to have troubles and worries and anxieties and problems. Don't torture yourself by worrying about things that aren't in your control. Leave that in the hands of God. Leave that in the hands of nature. Do your best to control the things that you do have control over: yourself, your behavior, your intentions, and your actions. If you do that, you will live a blessed and happy and virtuous and wise life. You will be a real human being. If you fail to do that, gradually the inclination towards debauchery, evil, vice, sin, to put it in theological terms, will become greater and greater. And unless you arrest this slide towards self-indulgence, you will harm yourself and you will harm the people around you. No rational being wishes to harm themselves. No rational being wishes to harm the people around them. Because of that, if we were to be rational, it is the same thing as making us good, and that is the same thing as making us free. Not free in the sense of political freedom, being a slave or a free man, but free in the sense of being autonomous, making our own decisions, making laws for ourselves. Free in the sense of no longer being the slave of our passions, being pushed about by our feelings, being a toy that gets messed with by arbitrary things that are really beneath the human condition, that are mere emotion. If we want to be fully human, we must be fully free, and that means fully rational, and that means fully good. Accept no substitutes, is what Marcus Aurelius says. He did that himself, and he hopes that other people will do it. He did the best he could, and you can't help but feel that at the end of his life, he must have felt relieved that the terrible crushing burden of this loneliness, a man that has no equals and has no friends, a man that has nothing but philosophy to guide him, death must have been a great release. It's like getting the evening off after you've put in your turn guarding the camp. And instead of becoming an obscure and unimportant figure, he's become a symbol in the history of Western philosophy of the practical, concrete, immediate virtues, the sort of virtues which are accessible to us, not because we have profound intellectual ability, not because we're a Newton or a Kant, but simply because we have problems and we're everyday rational human beings. The Stoic man says that a virtue that is possible for one man is accessible to all of us. There is no excuse for us not being that good. If we provide such excuses for ourselves, we harm ourselves and we harm others by preventing us from recognizing our true moral obligations. Marcus Aurelius lets us know that all people suffer, but that not all people pity themselves. Marcus Aurelius lets us know that all men die, but that not all men die whining. Something to think about. Take home with you and mull it over.
So that again concludes the Marcus Aurelius Meditations lecture, The Stoic Ideal by Michael Segru, God rest his soul. And I just want to read a few of these. These are just lines from the Meditations. So if you guys are familiar with this book, not that you need to read or anything, I'm just going to read a few lines just so you get a feel for Marcus Aurelius writing to himself. And so we'll just read a few of these and we'll move on. Understand at last that you have something in you more powerful and divine than what causes the bodily passions and pulls you like a mere puppet. What thoughts now occupy my mind? Is it not fear, suspicion, desire, or something like that? Do not return to philosophy as a taskmaster, but as patience seek out relief in a treatment of sore eyes, or a dressing for a burn, or for an ointment. Regarding it this way, you'll obey reason without putting it on display and rest easy in its core. Think of life, if you have lived until now, as over and as a dead man. See what's left of your life as a bonus and live it according to nature. Love the hand that fate deals you and play it as your own, for what could be more fitting? The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because an artful life requires being prepared to meet and withstand sudden and unexpected attacks. It isn't manly to be enraged. Rather, gentleness and civility are more human, and therefore manlier. The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. Again, when I read that, all I could think about is the apostles being in the presence of Christ. Wherever a person can live, there one can also live well. You shouldn't give circumstances the power to rouse anger, for they do not care at all. Keep a list before your mind of those who burned with anger and resentment about something, of even the most renowned for success, misfortune, evil deeds, or any special distinction. Then ask yourself, how did that work out? Smoke and dust, the stuff of simple myth trying to be legend. Whenever someone has done wrong by you, immediately consider what notion of good or evil they had in doing it. For when you see that, you'll feel compassion instead of the astonishment of rage. We are like many pellets of incense falling from the same altar. Some collapse sooner, others later, but it makes no difference. The mind is freed from passions in an impenetrable fortress. A person has no more secure place for refuge for all time. And of course, with Neuralink and the ability to look inside your mind, or at least the brain waves, and see what may be working, maybe later in the 21st century, it's all not such a refuge as it once was. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. Try praying differently and see what happens. Instead of asking for a way to sleep with her, try asking for a way to stop desiring to sleep with her. Instead of a way to get rid of him, try asking for a way not to crave his demise. Instead of a way not to lose my child, try asking for a way to lose my fear of it. That cucumber is bitter, so toss it out. There are thorns on the path, then keep away. Enough said. Why ponder the existence of nuisance? When you first rise in the morning, tell yourself, I will encounter busybodies, ingrates, egomaniacs, liars, and the jealous and cranks. They are all stricken with these afflictions because they do not know the difference between good and evil. Because I have understood the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, I know that these wrongdoers are still akin to me, and that none can do me harm or implicate me in ugliness, nor can I be angry at my relatives or hate them, for we are made of cooperation. We are made for cooperation. Dig deep within yourself, for there is a fountain of goodness ever ready to flow if you will keep digging. You have been formed of three parts, body, breath, and mind. Of these, the first two are yours insofar as they are only in your care. The third alone is truly yours. If anyone can prove and show me that I think and act in error, I will gladly change it. For I seek the truth, but which no one has ever been harmed. The one who is harmed is the one who abides in deceit and ignorance. Kindness is invincible, but only when it's sincere, with no hypocrisy or faking. For what can even the most malicious person do if you keep showing kindness? And if, given the chance, you gently point out where they went wrong, right as they are trying to harm you? Is it essential for you to remember that the attention you give to any action should be in due proportion to its worth? For then you won't tire and give up, if you aren't busying yourself with lesser things beyond what should be allowed. Joy for human beings lies in proper human work, and proper human work consists in acts of kindness to other human beings, disdain from the strings of senses, identifying trustworthy impressions, and contemplating the natural order and all that happens in keeping with it. How easily we love ourselves above all others, yet we put more stock in the opinions of others than our own estimation of self. You must build up your life action by action and be content if each one achieves its goal as far as possible, and no one can keep you from this. If you find something very difficult to achieve yourself, don't imagine it's impossible, for anything possible and proper for another person can be achieved as easily by you. Don't be ashamed in needing help. You have a duty to fulfill, just like a soldier on the wall of battle. So what if you are injured and can't climb up without another soldier's help? And this will be the last one I read. While it's true that someone can impede our actions, they can't impede our intentions or our attitudes, which we have the power of being conditional and adaptable. For the mind adopts and converts any obstacle to its action into a means of achieving it. That which is an impediment to action is turned to advance action. The obstacle on the path becomes the way. And so I will conclude by laying out the 7. So I'm not going to read this whole thing. This is the section for Stoicism. So it begins here. The Stoics and their logos. And you can see I got multiple pages that I have highlighted. If we had time, I was going to read all of it. We're already over the 2-hour mark. But at the end here, Marion Hiller has a list of the 7 points to understand the Stoic logos. And I want to read those 7 points to you right here. You see these 7 points at the bottom? So this will conclude our stream, and then I'll read any super chats, any questions or comments I haven't got to. So feel free to send those in, guys. Smash that like. Here are the 7 points to understand the Stoic concept of logos. Number 1, logos is the power or principle that shapes and creates all things from itself in its final analysis. The logos is immanent in the existing world. Number 2, according to Stoic metaphysics, to exist, something must have a body. Also, if mind were incorporeal, then it would not be capable of any activity. Number 3, logos, the power or principle that unifies and gives coherence to the world, was metaphysically associated with the artistic, self-moving, and generative fire, as I mentioned earlier. He has a whole section on this I was going to read, of Zeno and Clynthes, and from Chrysippus, with fire and air, the pneuma. This was done through analogy with the living creatures, which required, in accordance with the physiological theories of the epoch, heat and breath. That is, hot breath is a vivifying agent. Thus, the pneuma became the vehicle of the logos. And of course, when we think of Orthodox theology, the logos, Christ, comes, and then the pneuma, the Holy Spirit, the Pentecost, comes and now is present with us and immanent with us. Number 4, it is the soul of the world, mind of nature, God. Nature is an artistic and creative fire, and thus God is the seminal logos of the universe, of nature. Number 5, the pneuma, though corporeal, is not matter itself. The pneuma, unlike other elements, pervades the universe and establishes the individual parts of it. It gives coherence and holds together other elements, unites the center of the universe with its circumference, and prevents the universe from collapsing under the heavy pull of its own constituents. The pneuma does not have any weight. And number 6, the principle is manifested as natural law, necessity, and destiny. It functions as the macrocosmic and microcosmic levels as God, providence, craftsman, and the right reason at the moral level. And then number 7, the last point of Stoic logos, it operates in plants, animals, and man, manifested respectively as a particular nature or physis, a soul, or logos. The human soul is thus an offshoot of the divine logos. If breath and heat are necessary according to physiological doctrines of the epoch, then the human soul is, according to Zeno, a hot breath. And so I do recommend this book if you guys are ever interested. It's a great book, a little expensive. It's for if you're really interested in that topic. Not recommended for everybody to buy, but it is a fantastic philosophical overview of logos. So I'll conclude by saying, Stoicism isn't Christianity. It isn't a revealed religion. It isn't even transcendent. It's a pantheist, immanent understanding of the logos. But in regards to virtue, aligning yourself with this godly divine principle and the pursuit of living to the highest potentials of human virtue and morality, there is actually a lot of similarity with Christianity and Stoicism. Stoicism, I think, is, again, a useful self-help philosophy in the contemporary period, but I think it's going to run short. So when I was watching videos on the Daily Stoic, it's like, to me, it got a little bit bloviating after a while, because what's the ultimate purpose? You focus on the virtue and it makes sense. But like this idea that Stoic philosophy can replace the religious dimension in man, I think in the contemporary period, especially, it's going to be wanting. But as a philosophy, I think it's probably one of the philosophies that has the most accordance and similarities with our own Christian faith. So with that being said, I think Stoicism is a unique, interesting, useful philosophy. But ultimately, everything that it posits, especially about the logos, is fuller explicated and to me, in my mind, becomes more coherent and comprehensive in the Orthodox worldview, where the logos moves from a demiurgic, penetrating, pantheistic semigod to the second person of the Holy Trinity. So I'll conclude there. Thank you guys so much for the stream. Smash that like. I'll now read some super chats if anybody sent anything in. Austin DeTulio sent in $10. Thank you so much, Austin. He said, great content as always, DPH. God bless you and your family. Well, thank you so much, Austin. God bless you and your family as well, brother. Thank you very much for the support. Really appreciate it. And David Atlas throws in another $10. Thank you so much, David Atlas. He said, thanks for the informative streams, DPH. God bless. Well, thank you, David Atlas. I'm glad you appreciate all the research and the information provided in the stream. I believe this stream was jam-packed with information, more so than some of the ones that I've watched before. So I hope it was benefit to everybody. Thank you again to Leon for sponsoring the stream. And thank you very much, David Atlas, for the support. And Well Emmanuel, shout out to our brother Well Emmanuel, been a COTEL crew member for 18 months. Thank you so much, Well Emmanuel. And he just says, thanks. Thank you, Well Emmanuel. God bless you, brother. Really appreciate it. And then over on the Streamlabs, looks like we're all caught up over there. And then let me check the Dono chat. Over on Dono chat, anonymous person sent in $10, no comment. Thank you very much. The anonymous super chatter over on Dono chat. Thank you very much. And then John Kell throws in $15 and said, some more support, DPH. Got to get back to work. Well, thank you so much, John Kell, for an extra $15 super chat. I really appreciate that, my man. God bless you. Hope you have a great day at work. And guys, I think that is going to conclude today's sponsored stream. Again, a major thank you to Leon. I hope this stream was useful. I hope you caught some of the major differences between Orthodox Christianity and Stoicism. Again, that document I'm going to make available on my website for website members for $5 a month. You can download it. And I really just appreciate all your guys' support and love. I love you guys. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I will be back Thursday with a very, very fun stream. We'll be talking about spiritual warfare and demonic tactics in the 21st century with an Orthodox priest. I'll just say Floridoxy. And if anybody knows what that is, then you'll know who's coming on. So be tuned. That's going to be from 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time this Thursday. So that should be a great, spiritually insightful stream with clergy. We'll be talking a lot about spiritual warfare for men and women in the 21st century. So looking forward to it. Thank you guys all so much for the support, and I'll see you in the next stream. As always, until next time, God bless.